Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 5 to 9 Job podcast. I'm your host, Raymond, and today we are having another bonus episode. And I guess you all know what that means. Though this is not going to be like the normal usual podcast, I've decided to do this bonus episode a little bit differently because the others are usually diary entries or just thoughts I've had on my mind that I would like to share. There's usually a little bit of ranting, a little bit of banter, but not actually in this one. Today, I just decided to go through some of my best podcasts from last year, that is 2024. I wanted it to be like a top 10, but I failed, so I have a top 15. I'm going to start out from number 15 and then just go downwards until I reach number 1. And if that's something you would like to listen to, I recommend that you stick around until the end. Otherwise, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the 5 to 9 Job podcast. Wow, hello everyone. This is a podcast, so it is very weird that I'm actually rating and reviewing other podcasts on my podcast. But yeah, let's go ahead with it. I hope none of them sues me or anything. But I think this is in promotion of free speech. I'm not Elon Musk, but I mean, I should be able to do to do this. But anyway, I sincerely love podcasting. I've loved listening to podcasts before I fell in love with actually like doing it or like starting my own podcast. So I listened to when I tried to write them down, it was about 38 episodes. Actually, no, not 38 episodes, but actually like 38 podcasts, like different shows that I listened to. So I just wanted to first quickly go through that entire list before I go through the top 15. But I don't know, maybe we have some in common. Maybe you don't know the ones I listen to. Maybe you guys have recommendations that are good that I should sincerely like involve in my list and things that I listen to. So on my list of the shows that I follow and listen to on my Apple Podcast, this is strictly Apple Podcast. I've not used my Pocket Casts. I used to be big on Google Podcasts until it was shifted to YouTube, and I just feel like there is a lot of hassle in listening to a podcast on YouTube Music. I don't know if that's everyone's take on it, but I just prefer Apple Podcasts since I have an iPhone. And I don't know. And the other thing would be you use Amazon Music, you use Spotify, but let's just get into the list. So number 1 on my list is 7 Good Minutes. I like this show because it's just very short, very inspirational. Sometimes it has speakers, sometimes it's just Claude Lee Dennis speaking to you, but 7 Good Minutes is a good one. Bad Dates by Smartless Media. I love it, and I'll get into more details below. Pass the Meerkat. It's a great show. It's about these friends that have a podcast, and they just talk funny stories. You should listen to it. Obviously, on my list is Bezos Chirozi from Andrew Berinde. Kindly follow my guy on his podcast. And then Bigger Pockets. I have the Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast. Number 5. I have number 6, the Real Estate Rookie by Bigger Pockets, also real estate podcast. That's number 6. Number 7, I have the $1 Billion Brand. Going to have more about that later. Connected FM is it's more of a podcast from IFMA, and it's mainly for property managers and guys in the FM industry. So it has a niche. Then that's 8, Elevation with Stephen Furtick. Number 9, Forbes Daily Briefing. Number 10, FT News Briefing. Number 11. I love this podcast because it goes back. This guy actually does every episode about different founders and businessmen, and he reads their autobiographies and biographies of those founders and what it took for them starting their own businesses and everything. So if you are a historian, if you like reading about Steve Jobs, you want to read about Elon Musk, but you don't want to read the book, like this guy has a very good way of summarizing it all up for you, and you could just listen to him read through the things that he found interesting because he actually reads the books. And then he has this whole thing of he has an AI thing that he developed from all the notes that he has, and he calls it Founders Notes. So it has all these insights from all these notes that he has taken while he was reading books. This guy he's almost clocking 400 episodes. So those are almost 400 books read about different people. There is a few repetitions like Steve Jobs. The guy loves Steve Jobs. He has done, I think, 12 episodes on Steve Jobs. But yeah, just look out for that one, Founders, on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your other podcasts from. Next one is Ideas That Matter by Vusi. Going to talk more about that later. Inside the Strategy Room by McKinsey and Company. It's just a good strategy and business practice podcast for those that are into that high level management and, all that business stuff, but like consultancy. In other words, if you know McKinsey and Company. Yeah. And then the Money Guy Show, just because I want to be more intentional with my money. That's number 15. Motivation Daily, TED Therapy. Yep, need some motivation. That's 16 and 17. Number 18 is Prof G Markets. We'll have more about that. Real Estate Insights by Savos. Have more about that. Number 20 is Real Estate Maximalist by Alan Corey. Number 21 is TED Business. We'll have more about that. Number 22 is my own podcast and hosted by yours truly, Anchor. Thank you. Okay. Anyway, I listened to my own show. Might be weird, but yeah, it's on my list. Number 23 is The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. Number 24 is The Game by Alex Hamonzi. Number 25 is The King of the Snake and Other Folklore Stories from Uganda. It's not like actually a Ugandan podcast, but it has all these stories and, like the story of Chintu. I just found it so fascinating, and it was at a time when I was looking for more podcasts that are done in Uganda or about Uganda, and I just found this. It's by Rosetta, I think. Yeah, but it's a good one. You guys should listen to the stories. Like, they are good. They are nice and they are familiar, in other words. Okay, that's 25. Number 26 is The Oprah Winfrey Show. More about that later. The Psychology of Your 20s by Gemma. You guys, this chick has a very sweet voice. I wish I could mimic it, but I can't even mimic it. But you should listen to it, Psychology of Your 20s. I mean, she goes through very many different psychological things that affect us when we are in our 20s. That quarter life crisis, FOMO, the psychology of dating, why we cheat. All those topics are just inside there. So if you are 20, 21, even 19, I would say 30 or 32 is a stretch, but I think she still manages to get into that audience and even outside of those age brackets. So I think it's a good one for anyone that is more into understanding why and how some things happen, to humans. Anyway, why we do some things. Okay, that's 27. And then 28 is The School of Greatness by Lewis Howes. Number 29 is The Startup CEO with Mark McLeod. Also a good one, and that's just for entrepreneurs. Number 30 is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson. More about that later. 31 is Think Fast, Talk Smart. More about that one also later. Number 32 is Tom Bilyeu's Impact Theory. I love that podcast, and you just need to listen to it to know why. Anyway, number 33 is Top Audiobook Summary. So this is a podcast whereby they just read books and summarize them, and you can just listen to the summary. More so like you see these summaries on YouTube. So it's just a podcast without the visuals, and they have I think 50 episodes. I think I'm almost done with all of them, but I'll just redo them because, it's almost like just rereading a book, listening to a book. So it's nice. That's 33. So 34 is Unhedged by FT, the Financial Times, and Pushkin. Number 35 is a Ugandan podcast. We are going to talk about it. Number 36, and lastly, is also a real estate show by Ken McElroy. So that is Strategies for Real Estate by Ken McElroy. A great one as well. But out of all these 38, 40-something podcasts that I have just read through, I have my top 15. And actually, to get to 15, I really tried so much to break it down to 10. But I just had so much to say about most of these podcasts that, I just had to raise the bar to accommodate them. So my top 15 podcasts for the year, and I'm going to just go down from 15 to 1. And let's get into it. So number 15 is the Unhedged podcast by FT and Pushkin. So I'm going to say that the Financial Times podcast, so that is Unhedged, and then the FT News Briefing, and it's kind of blasphemy adding these two together with this third one, which is the Forbes Daily Briefing. Yes, so those are three podcasts, but they are almost about the same thing. I know, like, number 15 is supposed to be one podcast, and yes, I'm still cheating and bending the rules, but at the Unhedged podcast, the FT News Briefing and the Forbes Daily Briefing are almost the same thing. They talk about financial news all around there. The Unhedged podcast, unlike the other two, goes deeper. And for those that don't like to sit down and read the news or even watch news, these are a good substitute. I mean, personally, for me, the thing I hate about news is that they dwell a lot on the negatives and they only report on these bad things that are happening, which to me just doesn't give me the right energy when I'm going to bed. Like, terrorists, this. Okay, I know those things are real, yes, but I would like to get something in the news that would help me to be better tomorrow. So if I was to, I don't know, find out that, Meta stock is trading at this, never know. I mean, I could invest in Meta tomorrow. But that is all about the FT News Briefing and the Forbes Daily Briefing. They cover different topics. They could cover a specific entrepreneur. They could cover a specific financial situation that is happening in one country, in two countries, in the global financial world. And then the Unhedged goes further to break it down and discuss it so that you understand it. So it's sort of a discussion where they bring on analysts and they just talk about, like, they pick three headlines and then they talk about them. So if you haven't listened to any of these three, I would advise you add one or two of them to your listening list this year. Maybe the FT News Briefing, because they are all short, they are also digestible, and I think they are very easy to add. The Forbes Daily Briefing is around like 5 minutes. You could literally listen to it at 1.5x and you listen to the whole thing in 3 minutes. So I think it's a fair trade, if I don't say. Yeah. Anyway, back to the list. So that is 15. 14 is Bad Debts with Joel Kim Booster. So Bad Debts is a Smartless Media podcast that has had 3 guests at this point. I first fell in love with it actually when it was being hosted by Jamila Jamel. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, but she was so fun at hosting this thing, and she had so many friends that she would bring on to the podcast. But it's all about these comedians, actresses, and these influencers, okay, that tell their stories about their bad dates. So experiences in finding love, in dating. I mean, the stories are crazy, but they are hilarious. They are funny. They are things that are actually going on, and you're like, okay, wow. I may be single, but wow, people are going through things. And that's why I like it, the fun. And also the art of storytelling that these guys have is just so amazing. You see, it hosts a lot of comedians and actors, and comedians have that skill that they have honed over years just because, their art requires them to be good at storytelling. So it's a good podcast to listen to, and go check it out, okay? Okay, number 13 is Think Fast, Talk Smart. So this is more of a serious podcast. It's a Stanford podcast on communication hosted by Matt Abrahams. Yes, it's all about communication. So how to communicate, when to communicate, how to, frame your speech, how to frame the message, how to understand your audience. It's about everything on communication, the kind of situations you should communicate in, how not to approach someone in an aggressive situation. It's just so widespread on the communication array that I am trying to master that I always find a way to, squeeze in an episode or two once in a week. So I would definitely recommend it. This whole thing about communication and learning and honing the skill, it's about learning by repetition. And I can't say there is anywhere else to learn this skill other than this podcast, because it just brings on great guests and it's all about everything. And Matt is very knowledgeable on the subject. So I recommend any of you that want to learn how to communicate, just like it says, think fast and talk smart. It's a very good podcast for all of you to go and listen to. Okay, number 12 is The Game by Alex Hamonzi. The Game is an interesting summary on how to run businesses and all this Alex Hamonzi content. If you know him, he owns acquisition.com. He has all this gym content and has all these companies that he runs. And the podcast is basically about helping you to get customers, retain customers, and find ways to make your company more valuable and make profits out of it. So he helps them to scale. He is very good at business. You guys, this guy is good at what he says. He knows what he's talking about because he has experimented and learned from most of his mistakes. He is the best at all these things that you need to know to be able to run multiple businesses in this age. So it's always nice to listen to him and to hear what he has to say. It's not all about business. Sometimes he talks on life, but they are short and very digestible. No interviews, at least for the ones that I have listened to, because I started from the beginning, from the first episode, to kind of see the journey. That is actually what I've done for most of the podcasts I listen to. I am on this journey and want to see what others were doing then, because obviously I can't compare them, or I can't compare myself to them right now. What I am saying is that this goes back to that thing I talked about in the last bonus episode. Instead of comparing myself, let me say, to Alex Hamose's podcast right now, whereby he's doing, like, let me say, 1 million or 3 million downloads a year or a month. I don't know what kind of metrics he has. It would be better for me to compare my episode 1 to his episode 1, or my episode 20 to his episode 1, because I can kind of map out and see the changes he was making, and then also try to follow out that route through his experience, other than, fumbling and trying to shoot all the way to 100 when, I should first enjoy the process at 30 and 20 and 10%. So, yeah, I'm just trying to listen to this podcast. Same goes for Steven's podcast. I started Steven's podcast from episode 1 when he was still in his closet whispering with that husky voice, to all these new episodes whereby he started doing video, when he started changing the art, when he started to do all these innovations that he has brought in. So I think that was really helpful for me as a strategy. I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone, because it really deserves patience. And I think that's where I got this whole habit of listening to my podcasts at 1.5x, just because I felt so behind and I wanted to catch up. Up to now, I've not literally caught up with Steven. I think I'm still in episode 300 something, and this guy is very far. For all the new episodes that are good, that let me see, because I have a friend, Andrew. When Andrew listens to an episode and he's like, okay, you should listen to this episode, I'll download that episode in the future. Okay, this sounds tricky saying it, but let me say he releases an episode today that Andrew says, you know what, you guys, you should listen to this because I think we could pick out something from it. I'll go and download it and listen to it, but I'm still on my track record of finishing everything from the beginning. So, yeah, kind of crazy, but that's it. And that's the same with Alex Hamonzi. Wow, we are still on 12 and I've already said a lot. Let's speed this up. Podcast 11 is the TED Business Podcast. It's sad that I don't have much to say about this one, but I listen to it a lot. And for those of you that have listened to TED Talks, this is basically the same, but just that it has a host. She's called, I think, Madupe Akanola. I don't know if I pronounced it well. And she narrates it at the beginning. So she narrates about what the talk is about. Okay. She narrates at the beginning what the talk is going to be about. And then you listen to the talk that is given by, let me see, a speaker, or it was a recording or something like that. And then she gives a personal story at the end of it all to tie it up. Sometimes it is an exercise or even a further discussion with the speaker that was in the talk. And it's just nice when you need to diversify that kind of content that you listen to, because there's so much within this podcast that you can get. You can have things from the political standpoint, and then you have things from the business standpoint, you have things from life, from philanthropy, from tech, from career. It's just an all-round podcast that you could easily listen to and enjoy, and is definitely worth your time. So I think you should all check it out. Okay, into the top 10. Number 10 is Real Estate Insights by Savills. So, for those that don't know, Savills is an international real estate consultancy agency and real estate investment company. They have so many moving parts, yes, but it's basically a real estate company based in the UK. And it just has the most insightful real estate podcasts I know out there, or the most insightful real estate market podcast on the European market that I have listened to at least. They also have, like branches in Hong Kong, this and what. But when they talk global real estate markets, it's nice to listen to the conversations. It's also because they give me insight into the European market. Most of the other podcasts that I listen to are US based. So the Bigger Pockets podcasts, the Ken McElroy show, all these other podcasts are US based, and they will give you examples like of the US market. But to be an all round like individual, I just wanted to kind of have this feel of the European market. So I had that one, and then I had another one that I just dropped listening to after some time, just because I realized the Savos podcast just did a good job at aggregating all of it all into short episodes of 20, 15, 30 minutes. I mean, that is short, considering Steve is now doing 3-hour episodes, So, yeah, it is also hosted by this guy called Guy. I like his name. He's just called Guy. But he is just impeccable when it comes to hosting and interviewing. This guy is informed. He balances it so well in the interview, because even, let me say, like when he has 5 guests in the room, he's going to balance it all out so well and juggle them all into the conversation in such a way that you get to hear the best from everyone that comes into the studio. And wow, that is just a skill I want to have. He knows how to extract the best out of everyone, but he's also educated on what he is talking about. He will talk about, let me say, like residential zoning, and he'll give should I say a prologue or a preface in the conversation, like when he's introducing it and everything, and you be like, okay, he builds it up, and then when he brings in the expert to, add the final sauce, it is sauced. And anyway, the podcasts are just a good conversation to listen to if you want to learn more about real estate, if you want to learn how to interview or how to be interviewed, especially if you're going to be like on panels and everything. This guy does a good way of just like transforming you and transporting you there into the studio. So it's a very all-round podcast on real estate. It's hospitality, it's UK, France, residential, political influence on real estate. It's everything all in one with different themes. So I would definitely advise that you all go and check it out, especially if you're a real estate person. If you're not, you can just move on to episode number 9. Podcast number 9 that we're going to. So podcast number 9 is actually the Subtle Art of Not Giving, an F podcast by Mark Manson. For the best part, I like the intro. You guys, I wish I could play it, but I'm sure that would infringe on some copyright and stuff. But you need to listen to the intro this guy has. This guy's intro is like, welcome to the subtle art of not giving. It's just so on brand for him. It's on brand with the books. It's on brand with the person. And Mark Mason is just one of those people that says, if black is black, he calls it black. It's not going to be grayish. It's not going to be like, and he swears a lot. So if you are sensitive on the swearing part, I would say, it's in the name. So please, be warned. He has this one way of connecting with the audience. He brings on wonderful guests. He is relatable even with Gen Z just because of the vibe. It's not so serious, but kind of talking about serious things, and you can understand the kind of examples he uses, because he's using, most of them are examples about his own life or friends around him that he has experienced. So it's interesting the kind of style that he has, whereby he can talk about something serious, or he gets to this level of being serious without all the seriousness. I don't know if you get what I'm saying, but he gets serious without being serious because of the vibe. I'm going to call it vibe. Anyway, down to number 8, the $1 Billion Podcast. I got introduced to this podcast by Andrew. Oh, and this gives me a chance to plug Andrew in at Bezos Chivozi. He didn't make it onto this list, but I do love the podcast. He inspired me to start podcasting as well. So let's just give him a small shout out. Go and follow Bezos Chivozi if you want to hear more from Andrew. But yes, he is also a graphics designer, he's a brand expert, and he's a podcaster. Anyway, I first listened to it in like September, and it shot up to top 10 within like 5 episodes. That's how good it was. I mean, these guys just do a good job in dissecting brands and showing you what branding actually is, especially as I was thinking about how I wanted to brand the podcast, how I want to brand myself, how I want to brand the businesses, and how, let me say, the environments I am in. I started to see these subtle marketing ploys that these other companies use and everything like that. It's like when you listen to Roy Sunderland. If you haven't, just type that name in on Google. He has a very nice TED talk. He has very good presentations online, and he just has a way of explaining branding and the psychology behind branding in fun examples. And he talks a lot. He talks a lot, but he gets the point there. And I think he talks a lot because he has earned it and he has the experience and he is good. But anyway, these two guys are good at what they talk about and they know what they are saying. They are also not afraid of criticism. I mean, they will go and bash Apple in one move, and then on the other side, they will, let me say, like, praise it for the thing it did well. And it's all objectively done, no fear at all. It's hosted by these guys, Brian and Bill, I think. I actually went ahead and followed Brian. I think his handle on TikTok is Brand Boss HQ, something like that. But they really have nice content. I like that they aren't afraid to get cancelled and they are authentic in their evaluation of brands, how they think a brand should be built, how you should build your brand, and they talk about marketing and branding in one of the most fun ways I have seen on the internet. So, yeah, a big one that you should listen to, especially if you're doing business and you just want to understand this whole thing that, I don't know, maybe your marketing guy is not expressing well to you or your brand guy is not doing a good job for you. I think you can get some pointers from this show. But let's get on to the next one. Number 7 is the Oprah Winfrey Show. Oprah, we all know her. There is no need for an intro here, but she is arguably the best interviewer. Though I don't know if she would categorize herself that way, but she just has the best way of extracting stuff from people that really moves you. It moves the audience. You guys, I have cried like on 5 or 6 of those episodes. One of them I cried in like public transport in a taxi. I was like, wow, you know what? The story was just so moving. This story about this family that were trying to have a kid and then they went into a helicopter with one of their friends and then they ended up losing their kid and the lady got burns and she was in coma for, you guys, that story moved me. And she just had a good way of, nudging the lady that was telling the story to come on, keep telling the story. I mean, the whole audience is in tears. She is also trying to hold back the emotion, but she keeps guiding her down that route and taking her into this whole immersive experience that takes everyone with them. And you can literally be there when the helicopter, let me say, is like crashing. It's just one of the best crafts I want to build for myself. And that's one of the reasons I also listen to that podcast. I want to gain, not to be as good as her, but to just learn something from how she does it. The podcasts are moving, but that's a craft I want to learn. And she's very successful. She has been very successful with the show. She has been successful with the businesses she has. We thank her for everything that she is doing, but you guys just need to listen to the episodes. Listen to the podcast and tag me. Tell her that I'm the one who sent you. Anyway. Podcast number 7 is the Prof G Markets podcast. Scott Galloway might actually be one of the most interesting people on the internet. I mean, this guy is knowledgeable and knows what he is talking about. Like, he has the experience, he has had the success, and he has had the failure, but can make a joke out of it. He can, explain to you the concept and still find a way to tie it back to some funny way for you to understand it and for you to take away what he wants you to take away from the conversation. So, what I mean by this is that it's actually hard to be intellectual and crack a joke and make people laugh. I mean, it's a very tough skill to be articulate and then to explain this complex stuff in ways that people do. But he gets it very well. He has built this podcast into a very respectable podcast. He has turned something that is boring and not fun to listen to, which is the podcast literally is about markets and financial markets. That's what it is. But he is, let me say, explaining why a stock buyback would affect the valuation of your stock and what. And he cracks a joke in the middle and you're like, oh yeah, I think I now get it. But the complexity of the things they talk about sometimes is like really dashing. I mean, there will be in a conversation with an analyst and they are talking about all these financial metrics and they are talking about all this, and tying all these things together, and you're like, how is this guy able to crack a joke after trying to integrate all this into his mind? But yeah, that's the Prof J Markets podcast. It's about an hour long, 50 minutes podcast episodes that it has. And then I just love the advice that he gives on the podcast. He does it with someone else and they talk about the markets, they talk about the news, they break it down just like in the Unhinged podcast by FT and Pushkin, but they do it better in my opinion. It's longer than the Unhinged because the Unhinged are shorter. They're like 20-30 minute episodes at max, but they get other analysts on. They swear, so take care if you don't like that kind of language, but they have good guests on as well. It's educational with fun and I like it, so just go and check it out. Okay, we are down into the top 5 and I think this podcast is turning out to be longer than it should have been, but let's see if we can go through the top 5 and I'll get out of your way. Anyway, so episode 5 is the Bigger Pockets podcast. So that is the Real Estate Rookie Show and the Bigger Pockets Real Estate podcast. So I'm also cheating here by mentioning 2 podcasts in one, but they are more or less the same. They are like from the same person, Bigger Pockets. This is another real estate show, and trust me, you guys, you are lucky that I don't have all 7 in here. But for any real estate guy out there, you should actually just go and listen to this podcast like immediately. You need to just keep learning, and these podcasts help you in knowing what people out there are doing to make it in the markets as investors, as service providers, like workers in the market, and it's a really good one. The Bigger Pockets Real Estate podcast is the original one, started in around 2013. This is one of the other podcasts I started listening to from the first episode, so I've just like literally been 1, 2, 3, while they are about 1,000 episodes out now. So back in the day of Josh Dawkins, then it changed to Brandon Turner, then it changed to Robert Greene, now it is Dave Meyer, but the episodes are good and they talk about different real estate practices and so on. And then the Real Estate Rookie by Bigger Pockets is more of like, you see, the original podcast talks about guys who have like 50 units, guys who have made it, and they're just trying to share their journey and what they think other guys should do. Now, the Real Estate Rookie Show is like for beginners, guys that we can easily relate with if you haven't owned any real estate. So those are guys with like 2-3 units. Some guys might have 30, might what, but have just started of recent. It's not like the original show. So just go and check both of them out. Number 4. This one, to be sincere, is a tough one because not many people know about this part of me. But yeah, I do have my own belief and relationship with God that I don't share a lot, but I am proud of. So, number 4 is Elevation with Stephen Furtick. I was trying to think of the reason why I don't share this part of my life, but I was thinking maybe it's because I don't want to face all the judgment because of how I live my life. But yes, this podcast is the one thing that keeps me grounded in that part of my life. I just like listening to their songs, so it's the same when it comes to listening to the sermons. And I won't lie, from all the campus pastors, all the guest pastors, and his wife, Stephen Furtick is the one I'm really there for. Judge me, I don't care, but you need to listen to something that feeds your soul in one way or the other. There are others like Joel Osteen, and some people say Jay Shetty's On Purpose can play the same role, but that's exactly it, and that's the point. It's not about the podcast, but it's about getting something that feeds your soul. So just get one that works for you and get into it. Listen to it once or twice a week, and yeah, we are all spiritual in one way, whether you don't believe in anything or whether you believe in the universe or whether you are just breathing and living. Let's go to number 3 before I lose listeners. Okay, number 3 is ideas that matter. Hello, family. And then the deep belly laugh. Guys, this guy makes podcasting sound so easy. And the best part is he's enjoying it. Sometimes I'm listening to the pod and I'm like, this guy is having too much fun, man. Relax. And first, let the point land and then you start laughing. But yes, the stories, the accents, the testimonials, the lessons, the analogies, the jokes, the laugh, oh my God. The VT podcast is one you guys should listen to. The Ideas That Matter podcast by Vosi Tembekwayo is one you should definitely listen to. He actually inspired me in one way or the other to start this podcast. And in number 1, I'll tie it all back. I don't want to talk about that right now. So just stick around until number 1. But Ideas That Matter is one of the best projects Vosi has done, in my opinion. I mean, it is free for any of you to just go and listen to, and it is as impactful as any weekly class can be. And I mean, it's our own, it's African, it's our pride. We should be proud of such a podcast being out there with all the global reach that this guy has. And you know what? We need to celebrate more Africans and more people that are opening as many doors as he is. So, Vosi, thank you for the lessons that you share on the podcast, the inspiration to keep going, keep doing what you are doing. And everyone, just go and listen to the podcast. Even just one, just go and listen to just one episode. Even if you don't do anything for this podcast, like even if you haven't followed mine, just go and listen to his. I am sure you will love it. Just the way I always look forward to his episodes every week. And it's just great. You guys just go and check out Ideas That Matter by Vosi Tembekwayo. That is number 3. Okay, number 2 is the Motivation Daily podcast. If you haven't seen this podcast anywhere, then you are as mellow as anyone can get. I mean, okay, give or take, it's about motivation, and it has this whole range from the go David Goggins energy to the monk Zen meditation energy, that calms you down, the affirmations and stuff like that. For me, the podcast is just something I keep listening to almost on a daily, at least I think so, almost on a daily, to just keep my energy high. So as I start my day, as I end it, when I'm feeling down, when I need a reason to keep going, it's my go-to, Could just put on the David Goggins episode and he tells you how you are at B, star. And he tells you how he ran, I don't know how many miles without food and water, but I mean, that's not the point. But they just help you to motivate you. There are stories about people going through more than you are going through. There are stories about, how people go through the hard times, how to motivate yourself. It's just all about motivation. Some of them are short, some of them are really long. And it also has all these speakers, Jordan Peterson, Eric Thomas. That's actually one of the parts that this whole idea of having speakers that resonated with me, and I incorporated into my podcast. So I realized that having the speakers say some of these things or some of their messages themselves was more powerful than me trying to quote them. And obviously, yes, crediting them. And I'm careful to do that. So yeah, I think it's just a great way to, listen to, let me say, like Jordan Peterson tell you need to get your house in order. And you hear him say it, how he says it with all the emotion. But yeah, the Motivation Daily podcast is definitely one I listen to on a daily. And this one is actually similar to Tate Therapy. A lot of people don't agree with the message Andrew Tate has and everything like that. But Tate Therapy is actually not about him, although he does have Tate energy. Like the kind of energy he brings is what is in all the other episodes. But moving on to number 1, what everyone here is waiting for, what everyone has listened for what feels like more than an hour. For number one on the list is The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. DOAC is my best podcast for this year and is one of the best podcasts actually out there. I mean, it keeps getting better and better every year. And just before I loved it as a podcaster, I loved it as a listener. I've told you how committed I am in listening to all the podcasts from the beginning to the end. So as a listener, the conversations are just amazing. The conversations are so diverse because in the beginning, his goal was actually to like give insight into the behind scenes of success. And then it evolved into giving people a platform to share their life stories, to give advice that could help others. And then today, he actually interviews like the best professionals, the best in this, on how to achieve anything. So let it be health, let it be career, let it be sex life, surviving a war, the dirty games of politics, running companies, social media, everything. The topics are just so diverse that it's always engaging to see which kind of guest he's going to bring on next and what they need to say, because the conversation is always like well curated by him. It's everything you need. And that's why I actually love it as a podcaster. It is the way Stephen is able to curate the conversation, one, but the innovation behind how he runs his team is just mind-blowing. These guys are so good at something they call, I don't know if I'm getting it right, but it's like the 1% improvement. And looking for those marginal areas or areas they can just be better, 1% better every time they do it. That they keep on getting better and innovating in everything they are doing. You get it? Like, let me say, like how they developed an AI to optimize for the title of the podcast in episodes on YouTube so that the algorithm could easily push out their content. That was genius. I mean, for the YouTubes, for the episode shorts, like cutting them and everything, how he has this button under the table whereby when he thinks, this is a point I would like to like share and maybe later listen to or remove, he just clicks it. That is genius. Getting the mics out of the way. I mean, they now have the mics like within the chandelier, should I say, or like the lighting system just above the table. So when you're actually having a conversation with him, it feels like more of a conversation because you don't see all these cameras around you and everything. Okay, the cameras are in the background, but you don't see the microphones on the table and everything. And it just gives you a more relaxed environment to be in as the interviewee and as the one watching. I don't know if you get it. But yeah, they are always thinking, let me say, for example, the diary segments whereby everyone leaves a question. Like, let me say if I'm a guest on this episode, I'll leave a question for the next guest. That just literally helps you to tie one episode into the other. That is genius. His style of genuinely listening and wanting to have a conversation, not to take, but to give, is also one thing that I admire from Steve. All in all, this guy has worked so hard. Obviously, the team around him is good, but he wants to be the best. He is actively and intentionally through actions and not just, like plans, trying to be the best. And that's really noble. That is inspiring. And actually, while I was starting this podcast, the one thing I wrote in ChatGPT, because I literally didn't know what to do. I didn't have a mentor or a coach, and the next best option was literally Google. But now we have AI. So one of the prompts I wrote was, what would I need to do to have a podcast like The Diary of a CEO, but have the kind of ideas that Matter podcast by Vusi Tembegwayo has. And that's how I kind of had this structure built around the brand and everything, because I had decided on the name and I kind of knew what I needed to do. And through that simple exercise, I was able to find out things like how the name really matters. I mean, if you went and named your podcast if like you just started with the word you're going to, I'm not going to say you're going to struggle, but you realize that the number of podcasts that have their names start with they are very many. You get it? So it would be better to, like, let me say, name your podcast 5 to 9 job instead of the 5 to 9 job. I don't know if you get it, but I literally just went through that and I was like, okay, you know what? I can't make this work with the name, or maybe I'll rebrand later, but for now, it's going to be the 5 to 9 job. So you see very many podcasts out there. The Game, the Diary of a CEO, the School of Greatness, there are so many others. Anyway, it helped me with things like that. It helped to explain to me what distribution is, the kind of brand that you are building, and how it should be long term. So, in other words, I needed to build something whereby I wouldn't compromise on my core values for the short term, just to maybe gain a few followers and gain a few listeners, while throwing out the bag for the ultimate brand picture that I wanted to paint for the podcast. And the rest is history. The rest is actually what you hear now. For the past 30 something episodes, I have now recorded, produced, and released. And yeah, that is where I'm actually grateful to, Vusi and Steven for how they helped me shape this podcast. And that's also why I served a special spot for the 5 to 9 Job podcast in a category of its own. I'm going to put it in the category of top project that I started last year, and I know will help me follow my dream of helping others and building better lives for different individuals. And yes, this is my podcast, so I'm obviously going to be selfish and put it up here, but yeah, it's been very dear to me starting this podcast and doing this podcast, and I would recommend it to anyone that, let me say, if you are struggling with communication and you wanted to find a way to be articulate, you could start a podcast, you could start a mini YouTube series, you could find a way to get your voice recorded and just listen to it over and over again and hope that you are becoming better. But this podcast has been more than that for me. I am sharing ideas, it keeps me accountable, and I still feel like we have a lot more to do on this podcast in terms of the greater vision, because I wanted this to be a platform where I can help raise others and promote them, which I have not yet started doing in a very big way, but I hope I will, be more serious with it coming season 2. So it's going to be a journey, but I am prepared for everything. And this year, yes, I managed to squeeze the podcast into the list, but next year it will have to earn its spot. So I'm definitely going to do my best this year to make the 5 to 9 Job podcast a better experience for all of us. But this year it gets a through pass, so hooray for the 5 to 9 Job podcast. Go and listen to the 5 to 9 Job. Keep listening, subscribe, follow, like our content, and continue loving us. That literally wraps up this long episode, and I hope I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye and keep safe.